So you probably, there you go. So that's all recording now. But yeah, so good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us tonight for this session that we've titled Communities Creating Change. I can see some familiar faces here, but for those who don't know, I'm Claire from the Communities Creating Homes programme. I'm the monitoring officer for the programme, but I'm also an accredited community-led housing advisor, so I get to work closely with some of the groups who come to us for advice, information and guidance to develop their own community-led housing ideas. So tonight's session that focuses on how communities can come together to create lasting change in their neighbourhoods. This is something that's at the heart of many, if not all, community-led housing groups that our programme supports. And we're really happy to have Hannah from Nudge Community Builders with us to tell us the story of how local volunteers engaging with their community can achieve amazing things. So Nudge Community Builders, they're based in Plymouth, and they've won awards for their transformative work. And I'm sure a lot of the community-led housing groups that we work with will relate to that. And we're really pleased to have Hannah with us. We've also got Paul with us from the Wales Co-operative Centre, who's some of you may know. He was at the start of our programme, he was part of the team, and we still call him in to help out with sessions like this now and then, and with some practical advice for some of our groups. So he's joining us too tonight, and he's going to be looking at some practical advice about engaging with viewer communities. And often this starts by looking internally at your own skills and using these to help you engage with the surrounding community, who can then help you to achieve your goals. So we've kept the agenda quite loose tonight because we know that people are going to have other things going on. Of course, this time of day you might have been working all day and your tummies are already growling for your dinner, or you've got children asking whether your dinner is. I've got quite a hyper dog because the weather's been dreadful and she hasn't had very good walks. She doesn't like the rain much, so hopefully she won't interrupt our meeting. I've also got a husband who's on a meeting in the other room, so we're a busy household tonight, but we've allowed plenty of time for questions, so please use the chat to ask anything as we go along. We're aiming to finish no later than 7:30. What I will ask is if people can keep themselves on mute when others are speaking, that would be greatly appreciated, because sometimes we end up with a bit of feedback, which makes it hard for people to hear what's going on. But you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to Hannah and Paul. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah now to introduce herself, and hopefully I'm sure you will all enjoy and be excited by what she has to say. So thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. It's really lovely to be here. It's always good to be chatting to other communities that are busy doing great things in their local areas. So yeah, I'm Hannah from Nudge. I'm one half of Nudge, so we co-founded Nudge, me and Wendy together, and I've just got some pictures and things to share with you so that you get a bit of a flavour of what we do, and then hopefully we can have a good chat. So this is Union Street, which is the main street that cuts through my neighbourhood where I live, and normally it's a big A road, so it goes into the city centre. And it's got some sort of small businesses along it, but about 25% of the land is standing empty. And about 12 years ago now, we were really stuck as a community group. So I joined my local residents group mainly because I was lonely and I was looking to meet people. They'd had quite a lot of kind of the sort of like top-down funding, neighbourhood renewal funding and things like that had come into the area, and all of that had finished and gone. And so as a group, we were a bit stuck. And so to cut a long story short, we decided to take some bags of shopping and some different resources out on the street, and just to see like what would happen. And that was on one of the streets, sort of just parallel to Union Street, one of the smaller streets. And what happened was like lots of people came out of their houses, people that we don't normally see in like meetings or events and things like that. And they started to come out with like their instruments and with like all sorts of, some guy turned up with bagpipes and things, all these random things started to happen. And at the end of that day, we had this real sense of like, actually, there's something a bit different about kind of just sort of spilling out onto the street and celebrating what's great about our local area. So if you ask local people about Union Street or Stonehouse, they would tell you that it's an area that's people tend to avoid. So it's got high crime rates. Most of the services for homeless people and things like that are kind of based around this area. But also because of the amount of empty buildings, it's kind of given a sort of permission to lots of kind of drug-related crime and antisocial behaviour. And our community is in the top 1% most disadvantaged in the country, but that's not how it feels to live here. So we wanted to find a way to really celebrate what it is like to live here, the history of it, and all that sort of thing. And after that sort of mini street party, the police basically dared us to close Union Street. And after a year, the following year, we did that, and we've done that every year since. And it's become like this real moment, because obviously usually it's such a hugely busy street and so unfriendly for pedestrians and cyclists and stuff. And then the other thing that started to happen as people spilled out onto the street was that they started to ask about these empty buildings. And the main message was like, why don't they do something about these empty buildings? Probably meaning the council, but kind of not really sort of saying exactly who they expected it to be. And gradually we started to think, well, why don't we do something about these empty buildings? Why are they standing empty? And so the first building that we did was Union Corner. So if you look at this first picture, it's the one with the red heart just over on the left. That's what it looked like at the time. It had been standing empty for 25 years. And we very naively, about 5 years ago now, we crowdfunded £10,000 to bring it back into use. So the site on your left is a community garden, and that's where a building had burnt down. And then Union Corner itself is a space for local people to test out their ideas and make things happen. So you can hire it from £5 an hour if you're a local person. So really, really accessible. We have all sorts of different things happening there, music nights and different kind of support groups and stuff like that. A real mixture. But what we saw was by activating this space and making this kind of change happen on the street, the main beneficiary of what we were doing was the landowner. And that's what started us on our journey of like, actually ownership is really important, alongside all the lovely social things that happen in Union Corner. It's sort of really disrupted quite a tricky part of the street. And so we then started doing some street markets and things out on the street that really started to disrupt some of the things that kind of fueled that sense of feeling like people shouldn't spend time on the street. And again, this has kind of grown year on year. This came because the council closed down the car boot sale, and people wanted that bumping in opportunity. So this is like, some trading happens, but most of it is all about people being out on the street together and enjoying spending time together. So after we kind of did that and we sort of saw the impacts of that, we were like, right, next time we want to own the building, because the landlord, there was basically like a number of things that happened around Union Corner. So a strip club and a gentleman's club closed down because there were just more eyes on the street, really. And then he started to rent the other buildings that he owned nearby to better people. So he was then like benefiting from that as well as us starting to pay rent at Union Corner. And this is the thing that we've really noticed with community-led regeneration, is that often it's other people that economically benefit from what's happening. And that's the bit that Nudge is really trying to kind of tackle and kind of find ways to sort of address, really. So this is the Clipper, which was a 24-hour pub. It had been standing empty for about 5 years, and we bought it in 2017. And me and Wendy got to the very edge of like what we could do as volunteers. And so we both quit our jobs, and we were like, we're gonna give this a go, which was horrendously scary and risky at the time, but like thankfully has paid off. And so we bought this building with a range of loans, and our process is that we take on that short-term finance and then pay it back with a community share offer. So with the Clipper, we've got just over 150 investors, and we raised £205,000. So that paid back the money that we had to take on to buy it, and then some of the renovation costs. And we've got two flats above, and downstairs is a cafe space for startup businesses. We then moved on to the plot. So we started to kind of really understand what was going on with each building, why they were standing empty. They were classic kind of examples of what we see in high streets like across the country. So there's buildings owned by people in Jersey and the British Virgin Islands, bits of land with the Crown, all the kind of complexities that I'm sure like you also experience and kind of see holding buildings empty. And so we've started to kind of explore different ways of unlocking those. So this one is a joint venture with a landowner, and it comes with a development site next door that we've got for free for 30 years in return for activating this building. And that was really important because the activities that were happening in there were really detrimental to local people. So by really kind of opening it up, so this is the back of the plot where we've got like a food court now. We've got 17 businesses that have moved in. It was quite a scary time because we took it on just before the pandemic. So we took it on December 2019, and we had to really work hard to kind of grow the community that we wanted to, and like sort of obviously deal with all the lockdowns and things like that. But now it's really starting to come alive. So this is through the middle. So because we don't own this one, we've taken a really different approach to how we've invested in the Clipper. And that is by putting things in the building that potentially we can take away or don't add up too much value to his building. So it's basically filled with lots of sheds and greenhouses and things like that, and just creates a really different kind of shopping arcade kind of vibe. And we're really careful. So one of the things that we really don't want to do as local residents is gentrify the area. So we work really hard to hold spaces open for local people. So that includes like who we employ, but also who comes into these sheds, because we found that like the people that are confident to rock up early and would love to do something in these sheds aren't necessarily the people that are going to grow a community and the types of uses that are really going to benefit our current local community. Because we have control over these buildings, we have an opportunity to regenerate the area in a different way, in a way that doesn't displace our current community, but actually kind of grows alongside it. And something that's really, really important to us. So these are some of the examples of the things that we do out on the street. This area, Palace Square, has got the highest crime rate in Devon and Cornwall. And so by doing random kind of pop-up type stuff, or not random, it's actually quite sort of well thought through, but I guess surprising. So the average person wouldn't be expecting to see this sort of stuff. We start to see different parts of the community getting to know each other, including the people that spend a lot of time on the street and might be causing some of the disruption. So it's kind of really building those relationships and not thinking that it's either or, but that you can create an environment where everyone feels welcome and starts to kind of break down some of those barriers that exist in our community. And we do these quite often where really tricky things have happened. So recently there was a guy who had his ear cut off, like right outside of this business that a young woman runs, and she just felt so vulnerable after all of that had happened. The police took a long time to get to her and all of this sort of stuff. And so by popping up with ice lollies and music and pink carpets and things like that, it's kind of like really easy interventions, but actually what it's doing is starting to kind of shift how the street feels and how people feel about it. So alongside our buildings, this kind of thing is really, really important to us. And then what we found is those small things start to add up to bigger things. So this is the same space. And last year we put in more sort of semi-permanent infrastructure to help us do more things in this square. So we put up the canopies, which are all an artist basically worked with like pictures from the street party, and we started to put things in place to more easily do events and things like that there. And that's kind of what we found all the way through, is like starting with something relatively small and just adding on rather than trying to go for like the big master plan or the big scheme that you spend ages trying to get money together for. And we learned that from Union Corner. So that fact that we raised the £10,000, through that process we got like we had some really, really dark periods where we were like, we're going to have to give all this money back, we can't do this. And a lot of that was around how to manage risk as an organisation, but also that kind of sense of like things just getting bigger and bigger and more complicated. And so just breaking it down and just saying, actually, we can do things when we got lights in, and it doesn't matter like if it's not perfect, and all of that sort of stuff has really informed how we approach all our buildings now. And then this was sort of during the pandemic, we did a Day of the Dead event again, to just kind of have those conversations that communities can find really challenging. So it's that mix for us all the time of like, you know, the kind of practical DIY stuff in our buildings, but then also like, how does this play out in terms of building a stronger community? And then we've started to kind of grow as like a team of people, but also becoming more and more diverse because of the way that we've held the space. So different organisations and groups and local people are kind of diving in more and more as we kind of hold that space for people to come together. So this is our fourth building, our current building, which is massive. It's one of the biggest buildings on the street. We call it the Millennium Building. It's where my parents met. And it's the one that we were like, before we started Nudge, we basically figured out that this, out of all the buildings on the street, was the most deliverable. It needs a budget of about 4 million, but also is likely to have the most impact. So there's other really big, amazing listed buildings along the street, but their budgets are like way out of what we can imagine ourselves to be getting to at the moment. But this one is one that can really make a real change. So it's right on the edge of a lot of kind of council investment that is just like not really linking up with our community. So there's an opportunity to really shift how this street connects with the wider city. We've bought this in partnership with a private investor, which has been really challenging, but really exciting as well. So again, a different way to bring investment into our community. So we've bought it half and half, and we're both putting in half of the cost to renovate it, which you know, puts us in a good place in terms of getting match funding and stuff like that. But also we're doing the same model, so we're running a share offer at the moment. So this is inside. It was an old cinema. And we're looking at putting commercial uses on the ground floor, and then having this as a 1,500 capacity music venue. And then, yeah, we're doing exactly the same processes. So we've got our community share offer open at the moment. So we're looking to raise £500,000 of community shares, and then we're starting to kind of activate the space. So all the learning that we got from Union Corner and the Clipper about bringing people in, about the care that you can take in a building, and how you bring a building back into life in a more iterative way, is playing out here at scale, which is really exciting, but also quite scary as well. And then I wanted to kind of finish with a little bit about our land bank. So as I said, with Union Corner, and you see like examples of this across the country as well, about communities basically adding value and being part of the regeneration process until the point that they get priced out. And so we've obviously got ownership or control of several buildings along the street now. There's still quite a lot to go. So there's about 13 buildings that are still standing empty. And we've now assessed all of those buildings. We understand what's going on in terms of ownership with them. And we're starting to assemble money in a way that enables us to do like a land bank, but we're calling it a land exchange. So the idea is that actually we don't want the street to be nudge land and every building ended up being owned by nudge. How do we facilitate an easier way for communities to take ownership of some of these buildings, or lease them or rent them, depending on where they're at and what the opportunities are for that building. But we've just noticed that there's so many community groups that want to do things, and small businesses that want to do things, and to spend 3 or 4 years negotiating on a building or something like that took us about 4 years with the Millennium building. And it was on, off, and it was all about like how you could put the money together and all the plans together and stuff like that, and manage your risk as an organisation. It's really, really challenging. And so with the land exchange, what we're looking to do is to do that in quite a stealth-like way along the street before we make too much investment on the Millennium. We've already had an impact on the prices along the street just with what we've done with Union Corner and the Clipper. And so we're really interested in how we can kind of capture that value, because at the moment the people that are going to like benefit the most from all the stuff that we're doing along the street are the people like this one, where the building's been left standing empty for 15, 20 years. And so finding a way to kind of acquire those, maybe mothball them, not feel like the pressure to do things with them immediately, but know that they're there and that we can kind of work our way along the street is really important. So I thought that was another sort of interesting angle that we don't share a lot on kind of social media and stuff like that, obviously, because we don't want to pique the interest of the market, but might be something that you'd be interested to chat more about. So I'll stop sharing, but it would be really great if you've got questions or if you've got things that you'd like to know a bit more about, then I'm really happy to to expand on things.
Just having a look through the chat. Has anyone got any questions for Hannah? I think it's amazing what you've achieved in areas that perhaps people wouldn't normally want to go to. Tracy's raised her hand. If you've got a question, Tracy, you can unmute yourself.
Right, sorry. It would be great if you produced a manual on how to do it. That would be wonderful. But how do you engage a community around what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a manual's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like no building has been the same, but we've definitely built up like themes that we want to talk more about and that don't get talked about enough, I don't think, particularly around how you can support communities to take risks. So like we don't do viability assessments and things like that, and we've really pushed against that. And what's been interesting is as we've started to work with private investors, they don't do that sort of thing either. So it's really interesting, I think, the amount of scrutiny and challenge that communities get put under if they want to do something is almost harder and more barriers and quite often more expensive to borrow money and stuff like that. So we are really interested in kind of talking more about that and challenging some of that rather than, I guess, like this is how you do it, because it's never really the same. Like any, you know, everything is different, isn't it? In terms of bringing a community around us, like me and Wendy both live locally, so we live just like immediately behind the street, and we're both bringing our children up here and stuff like that. So it's kind of grown very organically, and people have, you know, kind of grown with us really on like with the street party and stuff like that. I think what we found as we started to scale and as we started to get more formal, there's been more, even more important to go along to like the soup kitchen that we do at Union Corner and things like that at the market. That's where we hear the things that are like really important to people, and where we can kind of sort of notice things that might chime with our community. So we don't do a lot of like formal consultation, but what we do is we kind of test. So we have conversations with people, test it out, and then sort of think, oh, does that have like resonance with others? So one of the best examples is how we decided on the housing and the clipper. That came from a men's mental health group that was meeting at Union Corner, and we were tidying up afterwards and just kind of chatting to some of them, and they were like, oh, hold on, my door's going, hold on a second. Sorry, it was my neighbour. She was stood in the rain, so she wasn't giving up. Yeah, so what I was saying about the clipper was like from this conversation at the end of the men's mental health group, they were saying about how they often find themselves in housing that's like either house shared housing, like housing in multiple occupation, and they don't have a space for their children to come and stay. And they quite often feel like, or there's not a kind of a private space for them to stay if they're a bit older. And so when we started looking at the housing legislation, we realised that there's a minimum in terms of like the size of a one-bedroom flat, but there's not a maximum. And so the two flats in the clipper were specifically designed with that need in mind, because as we started to ask more and more people, they were like, oh yeah, that's a problem for me as well, or that affects me because my kids can't go and stay with their dads and all that sort of stuff. So there's two dads living above the clipper, and that's enabled 7 children to stay with their parents that weren't able to before. And so it's kind of like, and then we can kind of talk about that more and more. So it's really incremental. It kind of builds up, and you build up that sort of trust and that credibility that I think is really important. I think that's the other thing about kind of getting a community behind you is, like, for us, there's been so many failed promises. So in some of those buildings that I've shown you, we've had, like, even in the Millennium, we had like God TV coming in and saying they were going to bring people from around the world, like on all these conferences and all of this sort of stuff, made all these promises about the economic and the social benefit of bringing the building back into use, and it wasn't delivered. And so for us, we do tend to stay quieter as we're going through that kind of real tough sort of uncertain bit. And then when we know we can deliver, that's when we kind of open up the conversations about what could be in this building, what's possible, and all of that sort of thing. And so it's also building that trust that you're not going to come sort of talking to people over and over again about the same things or about slightly different things, but actually that all the time you're kind of building on it, and that it runs through your organization, like, you know, like in every way. So who you're employing, who you're appointing. So we spend 50% of our money within a mile, and that's so important. It's like stood us in good stead through the pandemic as well, because obviously like everyone we worked with was local and all of that kind of thing. But that sort of thing, it kind of ripples through what you do, and people connect with it in a different way then.
Thank you.
I can see that Leonie's had a hand up for a while as well. If you want to ask a question, Leonie.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Amazing project. And I'm just wondering, lots of questions actually, but 2 ones that are kind of on top. One is, do you have any time? How do you free your time up? Are you paid? I missed that, I was a bit late. So are you funded to do this? How do you have the time to do it? And how do you build capacity? Are you, and is it possible to kind of link in with some of the strategies and so on? Are you working outside of your community? But firstly, how do you build capacity in your own community?
Yeah, so we are paid now. So we were volunteering for about 10 years, and it kind of just gradually built up and built up and built up until it was like, we can't do this anymore. And it kind of got to like this crunch point. But also, and at that point, like the most money that we'd had was the £10,000 to do Union Corner, and so we weren't experienced in kind of getting grants or finance or anything like that. But I think what we had shown was kind of our resilience and stuff around finding our way through Union Corner and some of the challenges there. So that's where several people said, if you and Wendy ever do anything, like, I'd support you and things like that. So for the Clipper, we had 3 local people that gave us loans that we used for the deposit on the Clipper. And then the council had a housing loan facility. So if you were putting in extra housing, you could claim this housing loan facility that, like, again, had to be paid back, obviously. So we just took like a massive risk on that. And then it was interesting because when we pushed ourselves to actually be doing it, that was when people came in. So that's when like funders really stepped in, and people were like, okay, this is actually going to happen, and this is not like a kind of conversation. And so, yeah, we had one funder that came and said they wanted to support us with our core costs for the first 6 months. So that didn't kind of like fully mean that we could get paid, but that plus some of the income we could generate and, you know, kind of different ways of sort of making money kind of added up to the point where we could pay ourselves. And then in terms of the building capacity, it is really challenging. So for ages, there were 3 of us. We've obviously now got 4 buildings, and it's like we've just gone up to 5 people, but even that, just practically in terms of having them open and operational, is really, really tight. And so we rely on a big volunteer base, but we also rely a lot on trust. So we create environments in our buildings where people can like open up themselves, for example, where you know, you create environments. We had an event at the Plot, and I left at like about 9:30 on Saturday night, and there were 3 people there that could lock up, and I didn't know who was going to lock up, but I knew it would be okay. And so there's a level of kind of like creating an environment where those people can step in and get looked after. You know things are going to get looked after. But it is really challenging because it's not easy to assemble more. But on the flip side, I've seen people that have grown too quickly and they just have more and more people, and they're not actually doing more and more stuff. And so in a way, there's something about kind of keeping that real sort of like leanness and you know, really stretching your resources as much as you can. I think there is something quite valuable in that as well, although obviously it doesn't always feel like that. we work really hard, but it's a mashup of kind of your sort of spare time and your work life, really, in reality, because we all live so close and everything.
I can see that Hugh's got a question as well. So I'll let Hugh.
Cheers, Claire. Thanks, Hannah. It's been so inspiring. I just want to go out and, well, it is actually chucking it down here. I live in Cardiff, and there's loads of stuff I'd love to do around my neck of the woods that you're giving me a kick in the bum to go and explore, really. Yeah, I guess I wanted to ask about planning and maybe expanding a little bit on what you were just saying. But I guess when you started out, this was relatively opportunistic. You'd see something that could be done and you'd think about how you could do it, and then you give it a go. Now you're in a more, now you've got a foundation, I suppose. I was going to say you're in a more comfortable position. It didn't sound comfortable. It sounds like you're still working your backsides off, but now you've got this foundation. Are you planning further ahead? Are you thinking 10 years down the line what things are going to look like on Union Street and beyond? And are you thinking beyond your immediate environment now?
Yeah, we are starting to a bit. So we have to for the land exchange, but we're going through quite an interesting process where, like, there were lots of people around us saying what you need is a master plan, and our experience of master plans, there's quite a lot of kind of more sort of traditional regeneration that's happened around the edge of our community, is that they tend to get like partially delivered over a really long time as well, much longer than they say they're going to do. And also the things that get delivered tend to be the things that people can make money from, and not the things that are actually going to make a real change for local people. And so at the moment we're doing a bit of like, yeah, I don't know what you'd call it. We're basically talking about creating a mistress plan, and looking at just like a really different way of how you might approach it, because the way master plans are, they're so deterministic, aren't they? It's like the trees will go here and this building will go this high and blah blah blah, and actually those things are so hard to actually determine, like, even if you own it, you can't kind of guarantee that you're going to do those things. So we're kind of thinking like a plan, but it's more about those things that I talked about around the economic value and the social value and the principles around things, and how we can use that to underpin this land exchange. So if land comes in, then it would be subject to maybe a different kind of set of rules to what they would be normally, in terms of like having to spend locally, employ locally, and things like that. But also in terms of like how they might kind of contribute more. But yeah, it's a tricky, it's interesting, like our local paper, they always refer to us as piecemeal, and it's kind of, I think, well, lots of people thought we were a bit of a joke for quite a long time. Probably some people still do. Do you know what I mean? We've had that, like, oh, you're just two women, blah blah, all of that sort of stuff. But the piecemeal thing just really annoyed us. But now it's kind of like, actually, that is what we're doing, but that is the right way. Like, we are doing stuff, we're growing, we're learning, and then we do the next thing and we learn from that. And it's like, it's not piecemeal in terms of like how a private developer would try and kind of do stuff. So yeah, we're like right in the thick of that, really, because the other thing we struggle with is that there's not really a very good language to explain a lot of this stuff. So when we are sitting in front of either private developers or investors or the council and things like that, we've had all of this kind of judgment. You get that sort of slight flicker behind people's eyes when you say you're a community business or a community organisation, as if like somehow you're like less capable, less knowledgeable, all of those kind of things. And so we're missing a language that like talks back to that in a way that they can understand. So yeah, we're having like lots of chats in the pub and stuff like that about what that could look like. But yeah, any help welcome on that. But I think, yeah, so there is a bit of planning kind of going on, and certainly like for other communities. So like we are like, absolutely passionate about putting, now that the door's open for us, it's like we need to put the doorstop in, and we need to make sure that other people can do the same. So the work we're doing around the land exchange, that's very much geared up with like, let's learn as we go, so that is replicable, those kind of processes and the legal advice that we're getting and things like that. So I kind of think that is something that community organisations don't often do enough, is kind of like, if you're getting on really well, like who else can come alongside you, and what can you do to enable that? So like, for example, we're looking at being a guarantor for a group in Bradford, and it's like, it's stuff like that where it's like, actually it's like, use our buildings like really wisely and boost each other up, so there's less barriers to other communities doing the same. I think that conversation is really important for us going forward as well.
I think that's amazing, and just that as an organisation, you're not risk adverse. It sounds like actually you're quite passionate about taking those risks and pressing ahead and building from there, and that's really paid off. So yeah, that's brilliant. And yeah, there's so many people I can think of that I want to share this recording with to hear your story. So I'm sure other members of the team do as well. So that's great. I am gonna hand over to Paul now, if that's okay, because time's marching on. But if there are any more questions, you can pop them in the chat, and we can still put them to Hannah and get back to you on that as well, if there's not time to address them before we let everyone go and get on with their evenings. But I'm going to hand over to Paul now, and Paul's going to talk about some practical advice and guidance on engaging with the surrounding community. So now we've heard the story of what can be achieved, and how Hannah's approached it. So Paul's going to come along and talk about how you can plan and look at the different tools in order to do that. So I'll hand over to Paul now. But thanks very much, Hannah. We're so glad that you were able to make it tonight, and it's really exciting what Nudge are doing.
Yeah, how do I follow that? What I'm going to go through today is not going to give you the answer that together by next week. I will tell you that now. Fab photos as well, colour everywhere, which is lovely, because I'm looking outside in Merthyr and it's really dull and grey, but I can still guarantee you there's people with t-shirts and shorts still going around in Merthyr at this point of night. Laura hasn't taken the smile off her face, and she's really good at staying still as well, isn't she? She's brilliant. Anyway, yeah, my background, I work for the Wales Co-operative Centre in the commercial team. I've got a bit of background in business, but I have got about 20 years experience working in the third sector and in community, 10 years on grassroots. And I was very fortunate that when I was working in the community in a grassroots basis, I had a partnership with an action research organisation called the People and Work Unit, and an organisation called Community Development Cymru, and later on Oxfam Cymru. Everything I was doing, because I was so fixed, as you do in a community setting, you get tunnel vision and you just end up doing your work. They were recording everything I was doing. And basically, I don't know if you know of Cobb's learning cycle, where you do something, you learn from it, you implement it, and you keep on going. So that's what we practice. So I'm essentially going to share with you today some kind of experience that I have come across, which is what my finding from working in community development. One thing I will say is, Hannah mentioned trust. It's not in my presentation today, but trust and transparency is the greatest commodity you can have in a community setting. You don't get very far at all with anyone unless you've got that trust and transparency. So let's kick off. I'm just going to put some slides up. Okay, so let's have a look at a little bit of theoretical. I hope it's not boring theory. I don't think it is anyway, about how we can help with community engagement. So who and how do we engage within the community? And so the question, first of all, shouldn't we be engaging with everyone and all of those people? I agree we should, but that's more from an awareness setting, if you like, because there are unique people and certain people which will help you boost the way that you conduct your community development and your community engagement. Hannah and Wendy, for example, from that organisation have been the drivers. There's going to be lots of other people which were involved, but it takes certain individuals to take the reins, if you like, or to make things happen within the community. So this is what I'm going to share with you today, is how to identify those people. Now, this is not a very nice analogy, and I use it in business training, actually, when people try to do marketing, but it's quite similar with community engagement. You've got a shotgun and a sniper. A sniper focuses on something or someone. Yeah, hopefully it's not someone. I really don't like these terminologies, but this is what's used in business. But with a shotgun, you try and, when you shoot a shotgun, all the bullets go everywhere and you hope that one of them hits the target. But by doing that, that's a lot of wasted energy. Whereas if we can find the person or the people that we need to focus on first of all, that will help us reach our target. As you say, no shooting involved whatsoever. So let's have a look at why people engage. And this is, I find this, I've worked in business and worked in community development, and there's so many similarities. This is actually taken from a business theory. So people follow you, engage you because they believe in your vision or cause. So they want to belong to your tribe, as they call it. That's the latest, especially with social media. People use the word tribes now, but people want to follow you, and to follow you, you have an attracted vision that they have bought into, And to do that, as you said earlier, we need a trustworthy leader, and people, you need multiple ways for people to try and engage with you, basically. So you either have this vision. Now it could be, as we heard from the stories from Plymouth, that lots of these people wanted to see a certain building change, or they wanted to see their, and they believe in the vision that Hannah and Wendy were providing, and that's why they joined. There are also going to be other people there which want to do it for to fulfill their own need. As Hannah said in her opening comments, she felt a bit lonely and just wanted to give back to her community. So in some ways, she was fulfilling her own need. The sweet spot, as I put there, is in the middle, when you can do both those things. But some people are there for their own purposes. There's nothing wrong with that. But we need to understand why they are involved and to what level they're willing to be involved with. So people usually get involved to improve their status, to have some support from others. You know, they get involved in a community initiative, and it's more about being around other people, to have that connectivity, etc. And some people for survival, just for information and to rely and to have help from other people. Yet again, there's got to be multiple ways and angles that people can come in to be able to fulfill their own need, because everyone's got different issues, and then they're coming from different issues in different areas. So we need to give them a multiple ways that they can enter into this supporting network, that you're going to provide. And you need to show that, and I think this is in both, to be honest with you, rather than just the one, that there needs to be some level of progression. I think with community development, and especially with housing and the kind of projects we're talking about, things don't happen overnight. So people need to see a bit of progress in order that they stay and maintain in with your tribe, if you want to call it that way. So that people need to see that progress in order to maintain their belief and to maintain being part of your tribe. So I got a little exercise now. What I found is that when I was working in a community development setting, you only meet people on in certain instances, in certain predicaments, and you tend to try and get a little your own perception of those people. And it's a little exercise I found, yet again from a business book, about when you come across either a statement or people in some instances, can you just stop and think, what are the absolute facts? What is the opinions of people? And what are rumors that I'm hearing about this person? Because people build up their pictures of individuals, community members, politicians, based on hearsay rather than fact. So a little exercise, chuck it in your chat. What are the facts? Give me some facts about, I'm Amber there, Father Christmas. Put in the chat, give me some facts about Father Christmas. Anyone? Anyone want to give me some facts about Father Christmas? I can't see any chat at the moment. No?
Hey, Paul, sorry to interrupt.
Hello.
I'm seeing stuff pop up in the chat, and I'm not seeing any slides. If you're sharing slides, I don't know what's.
I have been sharing slides.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if anybody else has seen slides.
Right, let's have a look.
Father Christmas caught me by surprise.
I don't think we are seeing slides.
Oh, something's gonna miss then. Let's have a look. That's really weird. Sorry. And my presentation has disappeared off my board now. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. Something like.
Would you like me to share them for you, Paul?
Wait a minute. I'm going to see if I can pull them up again and try again. That is so weird because I did press share slides. And I've been talking to these slides all along. Let's have a look. Can you see that now?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
it's perfect.
Right. I'm not going to go through the whole thing all over again. I will quickly zip through these slides. So wait a minute. I've got this thing here now, which is in my way. Slideshow. From the beginning. Right, you go. And by the way, I will, I've got all these slides that I'll be handing out and the exercise that I will be doing later. I've got that all for you. So you don't have to write any notes down. Sorry about this. Bit of technical difficulty. There you go. There's that. See, it makes so much sense when I'm talking, and you can see it, doesn't it? You probably think, what is he on about? And this is the thing now. So facts regarding Father Christmas. This is where we are. Thank you for stopping me there. We could have gone a long time with this. So yeah, facts about Father Christmas. I'm not saying that one just in case there's kids about. Wears white and red. Got a beard. Yeah, most of you have copped on to the thing. I have got some opinions and facts, but I don't want to say this out loud in case we have some younger viewers. It is. There's a question about existence here, so that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, usually I have the thing that he was red because of Coca-Cola. That's not true. But a lot of the stuff that we know about Father Christmas comes from the 1822. It was the night before Christmas, actually. Found that one out. So yeah, it's just a matter of, when I usually do this exercise, people give me lots of their opinions of Santa Claus, Father Christmas, etc. But we all know that there's one particular fact that is the only fact we've got. So when I was working in community development, I kind of found that three types of people, really. There's the people that like meetings, there's people who like action, and what I'm looking for are the people that kind of meet in the middle somewhere. So there's nothing wrong with these people. They like their meetings. Some of those people you probably have come across in community settings is sometimes it's about stature, etc. But they are very good at what they do. There's people there that just want to do things. I've worked in communities where we didn't have many people turn up to meetings, but they were the first people there volunteering. There's also another group that I've got, and I've got this outside, and I call them vocal locals. And these are the people which would stop me on the street and tell me how wrong I am at everything I do, but they would never be involved in doing anything. And but I don't discount them. Sometimes they can be a little bit annoying and they can be a hindrance, but I also believe that everyone has something to offer. So if I can find out what strengths they've got, and I can channel their energy into somewhere more positive, then there's nothing wrong with me introducing them to be an advocate. And I've had that. I think 50% of the time it's worked, and 50% of the time I've embraced them and they've rubbed some people up the wrong way. So I put those in red just to be a little bit wary, but there are people that simply won't attend meetings. It's not for them. They would rather be doing actions and being involved in things. And those people likewise may not want to be involved in meetings. So just be wary of that. So the thing we were looked at with community individuals is that, like I said, we want to look at an individual, certain individuals rather than the masses. And the diagram that I've got here is that out of a mass of people, we can find those individuals which have got specialist interest or knowledge, etc. And if we can work with those to help those and get those involved, they themselves will have circles of support around them, or circles of people that rely on them for information, which then they can spread that message to. And that's the way I kind of worked within the community development circles. There's a book that I read before I started in community development called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. And it was introduced to me by someone who had just been in charge of managing the recruitment of all the volunteers for the Commonwealth Games at the time. So that is how far we are going back. But I also read the book in retrospect when I finished working in grassroots community development, and it rings so true with so many things. So what Malcolm Gladwell says that there are exceptional people out there who are capable of stopping epidemics. All you have to do is find them. I know that's not very nice wording with the word epidemics at the moment, but I don't think he knew in 2000 that we were going to be in the middle of a pandemic. But I kind of relate to this example of puddles in a pond. It's about that, how many circles can we create? So that person on that last slide, it's about finding those right people and using them to deliver circles rather than just putting a message out to everyone. So the paradox of this epidemic is that in order to create one contagious movement, we have to find and create many small movements. So it's about finding certain individuals and then putting them together, but they will all have their own different connections. So I worked in a community called Glencoch, and it did take us 5 years to get to a place where the community was really doing well as a community development in a fast pace. It took us 5 years, but it took us about 2 or 3 years to realize who are these individuals which can speed up the process, basically. And they all had this one vision. They just wanted to see the community in the area much, much better, but they all had a bit of their own agenda in it. So one person, you know, you had the parents of a young mum who wanted to stand up for young parents, and you had a gentleman which was there about getting men into work, etc. But they all had the same vision. It was just a matter of finding them, then they would work their networks. So I had a gentleman, for example, his name was Hugh, and for 2 or 3 years we couldn't get men involved in any community activity whatsoever, no training, no volunteering, etc. But once I got this guy Hugh involved, he had an agenda. He wanted a job, so we helped him. We put him on courses, but he helped to volunteer to build up his profile. But because he was involved, the number of men that came through because of him, and they could see him involved, just grew significantly, until we had probably in our community members being volunteers, it was something like a 60-40 split between 60 women, 40% men. So Malcolm Gladwell also says that these 3 people are 3 different type of personality types. And I totally agree with this as well. So there's connectors, people that simply know lots of people, all by acquaintance rather than close relationship. So I don't know if you come across the game 6 Degrees of Separation or 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, if you're into the film, a film type of thing. But there's a thing called the strength of weak ties. So this is about, it's knowing someone a little bit, but they can introduce you to someone else or introduce you to someone else. So take, for example, let's do a little game. I want you to, in the chat, tell me how, without leaving a house, you can get an autograph of a Welsh rugby player within less than 6 people. Can anyone do it? And I can see the chat now. Can anyone, without leaving the house, get an autograph of a Welsh rugby player? No. Casey, yes. Casey, do you want to give me a 6 degrees of separation for a rugby player?
Well, I was thinking the rural housing enabler from Monmouthshire, who we work very closely with, David James.
Yeah.
He is the father of Becky James, who is the famous cyclist. She is married to a famous Welsh rugby player. I don't know which one. I think maybe George North.
Okay,
So
doesn't matter which one. So how many is that? 3 stages?
Yeah.
Yeah, and now, because we all know Casey, if he won that autograph, that's a 4th for the rest of us now, isn't it? So yeah, if you want a Welsh rugby player autograph, see Casey after this. Another one, for example. Let's not do that. Last one. Oh, here's a fun one. Without leaving the house, get a message of national importance to Boris Johnson. Please keep it clean. Please behave. But say you've just found a pill that stops coronavirus. How can you tell Boris Johnson? Can anyone get a message of national importance to Boris Johnson? Who?
Yeah, my sister's wife went to school with Boris's missus.
Oh, they are?
So they've only used that connection once for something they're trying to achieve around. In England, the NHS doesn't fund IVF treatments for same-sex couples. Right. So they've gone to, I can't remember her name.
Harry.
Anyway, yeah. They've gone to her to see if she'll give him a note, to see if he'll do something good for the country for a change. But otherwise, they've held on to that little nugget.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. But what I could say is, I think most of you are acquainted with Julie James. Julie James can speak to Mark Drayford. Mark Drayford can go straight to Boris Johnson. Strength of weak ties. In 3, any of us could. Now that's a really elaborate kind of over advantageous kind of example, but think of real people. If we needed to get the advice of an architect, if we needed to get advice of a doctor, get a job into somewhere, there's people that know people that can get us in there. One of the things on a very small community level, I met someone. I did one of these maps, which I'm going to explain to you in a minute, with someone a couple of months back. And during the pandemic, he was a plasterer, and during the pandemic he hadn't worked for 6 months. And he said, Paul, I've been trying to get into work, and I go down to the job centre every single week, and there's no plastering jobs going. I don't know what to do. And I said, well, while we've been chatting, you've told me you play for the local football team. And he said, yeah, what's that got to do with plastering? I said, I can guarantee you that if none of the people on the football team have a work within the trades, they will know someone who works within the trades. Let's do a bit of that. I hate the word pyramid selling, but why didn't you just, go to the football team and say, look, I need some work. Anyone know of any plastering? That person was on a building site within 2 days, because he had assumed that he needed to go to a job site to get his job, but he never looked at his own connections. But that connection was, he'd exhausted his contacts that worked within the trades, but he hadn't exhausted the contacts of his friends. So really a connector is someone who just know lots of people, and they don't need to be very, very close relationships with them. They just know people, but those people can put you in touch with people. So they are one of the key people within a community. You've also got Mavens, and these are people who just, they got lots of knowledge, and they're willing to share it with you. They call him, sharers, information brokers, if you like. I used to know a gentleman he was a researcher, but whenever I wanted a quote for a piece of work that I was writing, I would just email this gentleman. His name's Duncan, and within 5 minutes he would come back with some quotes, some academic quotes to back up whatever I was trying to say. Like, I just called him Dr. Google, basically. But there are people out there that, you can go to your community, say, I'm going to buy a new car, and someone will go, well, I think you need to buy this car, and you can buy it here, and it's on sale here, and they just know loads of information. So Mavens are really important as well, because they're the people that other people go to for information. So now we're starting to get a thing where these people are individuals which have got connections to lots of other people. And the last one is salespeople. Now, this isn't particularly in the word of like a salesperson is in sales, is in a business sense. Influencers, I like to use instead. But salespeople, that doesn't have to be your politician. These are just people that listen to. In my old community, as I talked about before, Glencoe, the most powerful woman in that community was a lady called Jackie, who ran the bingo on Tuesday nights. She ran the community centre. Whatever Jackie said is word in that area. She would never call herself a leader. She would never call herself an influencer. She'd be surprised if I even mentioned her, to be honest with you. But in our community, we have these unsung heroes, these unsung leaders that when they speak, we listen to. So these are the 3 key people that if we want to grow things quicker, these are people that we can get connected with. And if you've got these people on side, then things grow, they have their own connections. So when I look back at my work life in community in Glencoe, I was there for 10 years, I realized all my main people, center of all my groups, all had 1 or 2 of these different personality traits. So something to keep in mind. The one thing I will say is working with the usual suspects, it's so easy to use the same people all the time, or rely on them. That is dangerous territory, and I've seen that as well, where certain individuals were then asked so much of them that they just become fatigued, and sometimes you develop a relationship with them that they look to you for support, but they become dependent on your support. But there's also then a fear that by using the same people all the time, you have limited ideas. The sustainability of any idea is going to be limited. For example, Hugh, one day he got a job. Fantastic. That was that's what he wanted. And that's what I wanted for him. But the people that followed Hugh, some of them dropped off. because they were in it because of who. So it gives you an example that you need to spread it quite thinly as well. And also it gets a bit stagnated if you just have the same people all the times. So what can we do? I'm going to teach you a quick an exercise, if you like, called asset mapping. It's something I refer to all the time, and I use it in loads of different ways. I was introduced in a community development context. It's there for individuals, to help individuals look at their strengths, but you can use it, as I will explain as I go further on, for asset-based community development, solving problems. I use it for doing research. I use it to find out about communities, etc. So I love this methodology, and I've also got an exercise sheet that we'll put in the chat later, or click and send you, and you can use it and do it in your own time. It is essentially for individuals first, as in for you to do it on yourself, but you can do it with other people. And when you merge these together, great things happen. So the concept of a plan, and any plan really, is, if we have a look at this example on the left, that is what we call Magic Roundabout in Cardiff. And if I'm not that familiar with that area in Cardiff, which I'm not, and I'm running out of petrol, I haven't got the foggiest way to go. I'm going to just take me where my instincts take me. And that could be 12 miles down the road into, actually, I can go into the docks from there, to be honest with you, but well, I won't be able to get petrol. But if I look at a map on the right-hand side, that is the exact roundabout there. I can see where the build-up areas are, and I can imagine that I've got a better sense of where I can go for my petrol. And it's the same kind of concept in life. If we are going through life where we are just going to come to things as they hit us, and we'll follow things our instincts take us, that's great. But could we have missed out on opportunities, and could we have used other things to help us, and could we have had a better journey, if you like? And that's all this little technique does. So an asset map looks something similar like this. It was devised by a community development company, and they worked with Oxfam to come up with this methodology. They call it the asset pentagon. And basically they realized that in everyone's livelihood, you have these 5 elements. So you've got a social, I'm going to call them assets. They get also known as strengths, but you've got social assets. So you've got, these are your networks, your connections, your financial assets. This is finance, funding. And all of this is not just of what you've got, it's what you've got ability to get as well. You know, what you've got access to. These public assets, these are public services, public transport, shops, governmental departments, etc. You've got human assets. These are the things that you've got, you can do. And physical assets, these are things which are actually owned. So the concept is that you basically try and map as many assets that you've got from each of these. Now, I've only done 3 on each of these for an example, but you map as many as you've got. And then when you come across a problem, or you're looking for a direction, then you can see what you've got out of everything to help you make your decisions going forward. So this was my asset map in 2016. I had just been made redundant, and I did a map of all the things which I had in my life. I had a bit more than this, to be honest, though, but for purposes of trying to fit it all onto a page. But these are all the things which are close and important to me. So, you know, I had links with charities, housing associations, local government, etc., because of my community development background. My financial situation, it wasn't that good, to be honest with you. My partner had an income, which meant she could feed me and put a roof over my head, etc. There's support there if needed. These are the public assets which I had access to. So schools, colleges, local authority departments, etc. Human assets. So I liked training. I like to be involved in training people. Community consultation, community engagement, community activism. They're all the things that I was involved in. I was previously a business advisor. That's how I somehow fell into community development. And then these are the things that I owned at the time. So I basically assessed all of these. I thought, well, what can I do? I really like training people. What happens if I become a trainer? And so that's what I did. I started up my own training company. I looked at all of these, and I looked at any my problem was that I was redundant and I needed a job. I couldn't wait around for a job to come up. I needed to do something there and then. So I decided that I like training people so much that I was going to start my business, a training business, self-employed training business. And then I looked at every single one of these assets and I thought, what can help me here? So all the green ones are resources. These are all are potential things that I can use to help me become a self-employed trainer. So I can use my community consultation skills. I needed my laptop, I need an iPhone, car, blah, 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 blah. All the blue ones are the people that I'm going to try and go to for my customers. So I already started to create my own action plan. Now you may think, what the hell has some of these got to do in here? Karate community. What has that got to do with me becoming a trainer? Well, it turns out two of my fellow karate practitioners, if you like, they've got a successful private training business. Now, I wasn't going to be any competition to them, but because it was a completely different field, but they helped me to establish how I could do my training. I realized that if I wanted going to schools and colleges as a trainer, I needed a qualification. I didn't have one, a teaching qualification. So I went into a colleague at Cardiff Met, and I said, this is what I need. So they told me, if I do this course for 13 weeks, it costs £300. But as I'm started a business, I can access their start a business fund, and they give me £500 to start up my business. So through that connection, I found out I can get a qualification. Okay, it took me 12 weeks, but I can get my qualification and it'll cost me £300, but I'll get an extra £200 back. So I actually made money by going on a course, worked that one out. Finally, and we're talking about an example of the strength of weak ties. When I was going out on the road delivering training, I needed paper, handouts, and I needed a projector. So with the paper, I went on social media. So I used my connections, my social connections, and on social media connections, I didn't have to go to social media to speak to my partner. My partner is a teacher, so she was able to print some stuff off of me from in the college. But my old community organization said, whatever printing you need, Paul, it'll be done for you. So there you go, done it for free. Then the projector. I bought a projector for £150. It was the worst piece of equipment ever. Wish I'd never bought it. And so yet again, I went to the social media and I put a post out saying, I want to start up this business which helps people recognize their strengths. Can someone help me, point me in the direction where I can get a good quality, cheap projector? Lo and behold, within 24 hours, I had a brand new, in the box, never opened, £1,000 Sony projector on my lap. My girlfriend had shared it. Her mother had picked it up. Her mother had shared it with the church. The church had two of them. They didn't want one of them. They thought I was going to do good with it, and they gave it to me. I've never been to that church ever, but it just shows that you can, the strength of weak ties. But I started up my business with zero money, and all these resources helped me. Now that was my particular picture. The other thing I was going to say from here is that when I finished training, I looked at this again and I became a community engagement officer. You know, I used to, as a consultant for Welsh Government, I used to go in communities and do all the focus groups from us. There's lots of, I think there's 4 different businesses that I came up with and delivered out of this one exercise, which took me an hour. But that was my problem. But can you imagine any problem you have, whether it be financial, engaging with people, isolation, this, that, and the other. Try mapping everything that you've got down and then basically trying to find out how each one of those assets can help you. And the beautiful thing of this is when I do this out in the community, this gives me an instant snapshot of that person and that community. If I do this in bulk, so when I work in a community setting, if I'm going into a new community, I will do this with about 15 people over 3 days. Nobody's really stopped me and said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'll go into the local library. I'll have a word with the librarian and say, do you mind if I just stop a few people to do a bit of research with them? No problem at all. And I've stopped people and said, do you mind doing one of these with me? And I give them the sheet after. It doesn't, for them, they can use it for their own purpose. But for me, that chat tells me everything about that community. And when I did it for a place called the Avon Valley in Neath, I did it with 15 people in 3 days. I had a really profound understanding of the needs of that community. Also, flip side of that, can you imagine if I did one of these? Let's have a look at people on the call. Leonie did one of these, Casey did one of these, and the three of us got together. How many strengths have we got put together? So if you can get your strengths and put them together, that is what I classify as asset-based community development, is when you can put these together. I use this at the moment. I meet with individuals to do a bit of research on people's livelihoods on behalf of a housing association, a longitudinal study. I'm doing it before they move into their house, and I'm doing it 2 years after they've been living in that house to find out how their lives have improved or not, by using this as a way of mapping all their activities. So you can complete your own asset map. I'm going to give you the tools. I'm going to try and cut this a little bit shorter because we don't want to go through it one by one, but it's easy. I've got a template you can use. You've got you have a pentagon, you draw in the middle of a piece of paper, and you ask yourself, what do you already know, or what do you already have access to? Quickly skimming through it. Always start with social assets. This is the most important thing. Social assets are the most important assets of all. Without people, you've got nothing. You know, even if you've got a building, you need people to fill it. So always start with your social assets. These are the questions that they're all on the spreadsheet for you, on the fact sheet for you. These are questions that you can use to help you start to plot it. And in there as well, I've snuck in those people, connectors, mavens, and influencers for you. Another way of doing that, there's another little trick, is the circle. You write down, you have these circles in the intimacy circle. So who are the people we can find in? Who are friends? Who are people and organizations that we participate in? And who are the people that we just have exchanges with? These are all your social networks, whether they be personal or professional. So for example, you are all right now linked into the Communities Creating Homes project. So when you go and do your asset map and you look, if it is about trying to find ways in how you can improve, we should be there first and foremost. Next one is the public assets. These are buildings, spaces, and basically public services that you're available to. Yet again, some questions to help you along. Another quick way you can do one is to help you with that is a stakeholder map. On this circle here is simple, yet again, just use some circles. On this one here, we've got a mental health in young males problem issue that needs resolved. So the GP, the local health board, and men's sheds have come together. Now, they want to take this up a notch. Now, men's sheds don't know the MP, but they brought in the local health board, which knows the AM, which knows the MP. Yet again, it's about being strategic on the people you work with so you can use their connections as well. Human assets. I go down to 3 simple things: your head, your heart, and your hand. Head is your experience and your knowledge. Your heart are your interests, passions, and I would also say your values as well. Because if your heart's not in it and your values not in it, you're not going to be sticking around doing whatever you want to do for that long. And your hand. These are the things, the skills and abilities you can use. Also a very good technique if you're going to do a skills audit amongst your group. Physical assets. So this is about what you own and what you can use to help you get along. Think of the things which would really put you in trouble if they disappeared: your mobile phone, your laptop, etc. The essential things that you need. Financial assets. I always leave the financial one to last. I never want to know people's ins and outs of their income. It doesn't have to be that. In this capacity, we will be talking about what finances are available to you and what do you need, basically. Where can you get that money from? Grants, etc., loans. So to sum up, I use that technique for individuals. That's what it was originally designed for individuals to help them solve problems, find a direction, like what I did. I didn't know what to do. And so I came up with the idea of starting up my own business. It helps you be best prepared. Like I said, I used all of those assets, each one of them individually, to help me start that business then. It helps you find ideas. If you put multiple maps together, imagine the strengths you've got of a group. If you put all those strengths together, I know there's one particular housing group on this call, which you put all those people's strengths together, you've got one amazing team. conduct a map of your community. So what you could do, if you didn't want to go down that route of getting everyone's strengths, which could be difficult if you've got a big group, but what you could do, if you've got 2 or 3 people and you use that filter to ensure that you are talking about facts, not opinions and rumors, etc., you could sit there and map out all the strengths you've got of your community as a lighter touch version, but still highly useful for you. And the other thing is that, like I said, I've used it as a research capacity to get to understand snapshots of people's livelihoods and also snapshots of community needs, and it's really useful. So I hope that is of help. Sorry about what happened at the beginning of the session. We must have had a technical hitch, but Laura is still sitting still and smiling, so she must have loved it. So I hope that was of use. And yeah, if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to give it. I will put those things. I put the slides, which you missed the first lot, and the template in the chat box for you now. But if it doesn't work, click and email them out to you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're at 7:30, but we can hang on for a couple of minutes if anyone's got any questions, and certainly if you wanted to email any questions to us as well, we can ask for those and get back to you too. So does anyone have any questions at the moment? There you go. Tracy's raised her hand.
Fire away, Tracy. You're on mute, sorry.
Contingency planning. Mm-hmm. After you've engaged your community, how do you make the idea carry on? In other words, if I fell sick tomorrow, and you've got all this going on around you, who in your community can you bring together around you? Is that trust and transparency, or?
Absolutely, there's trust, transparency, but people have got to be following your vision as well. You're in a dangerous game if you're the one and only person which is treading that walkway, basically. And so I wouldn't make any major moves unless I knew I had those people. And it is about finding those individuals which have the capability and the capacity and the passion as well, as much as you in driving that forward. Because like I said, that one person pulls out, you've lost the sustainability as well. And it also comes down to that thing where, that usual suspects thing. You really do want to have the usual suspects scenario. You need to get as many of those individuals on board. So it's about hopefully taking from that one of those first slides where they've either got to be part of your tribe that are fulfilling, they are fulfilling a vision that they have absolutely bought into, or we're also looking at their need. However, that is the scary one. If they're only there for their own individual purpose and they meet that purpose, you could lose them. Like I say, my example was that gentleman called Hugh. He did a fantastic job. Took us exponentially more than we'd ever dream of, but he got a job, and that is the best thing for him. I can't hold anything against him. That's what he wanted. That's what he but it was a difficult legacy to fulfill once he had pulled out. So it's just keeping that in mind, and you'd be surprised when working with groups that they don't consider these things. That's sorted now. That person's dealing with it. But you've also got to think what happens when that person disappears. So yeah, it's just to try and get as many people to buy into that vision. And I think quick wins, I know it's a horrible term, but that when people are buying into vision and they can see progress, the more progress they see, even though they're little steps, they're seeing that things are moving. The longer you go without nothing happen, people get a little bit despondent then. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks.
That was me on it then. Yeah, Jasmine.
So do you want to say anything briefly about advice about working with, say, like the asset mapping and the visioning? Because what I do, we call it surveying, but we normally do vision first. But any thoughts on that? How you work those two together?
Say again. Can you repeat the question a bit? Again, I missed the beginning.
just if you had any thoughts really with when you're working with a group of people about, say, getting them to have a vision, develop a vision, and how you might integrate that with these sort of asset mapping kind of stages.
I'm a big fan. I'm not. Here we go. Watch all my team members goes. Huh. Simon Sinek start with why. So I always start with the why, basically, to try and ascertain what is the general vision about it. If we are going for a project, regardless, people don't do things because of what they can do and how they can do it. People do things because why they want to do it. The example I always give is that teachers don't become teachers because they want to do loads of admin, work ridiculous hours, and get shouted at by parents. They do it because they want to educate kids. Same with doctors and nurses. They want to save lives. They don't do it for the long hours. So if we can ascertain our why, I would say, once we've got this agreed vision by everyone of what they want to achieve, you use the asset map to find out how you can do it by looking at people's strengths and what strengths people can apply to it. Is that kind of way? Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Thanks.
I think that's great, Paul. I love the asset map because I think a lot of people are inclined to be quite modest about their connections and the skills that they bring. So it's really useful to groups that are starting out.
I will say on that, sorry Claire, sorry to do. I will say that when I've done it, people will tell me anything and everything. They're very, very willing. And if you are doing it with someone in a very vulnerable community session, I've had to train people up in the past, and I've got to say this, that when you're doing with someone who's a bit vulnerable, they can tell you stuff. I've had disclosures which I've had to, make to people. I think Casey was with me one time when I was telling someone that whatever you tell me, and I do start with the thing that anything you tell me, this is for you, this exercise, but anything you tell me will be in confidence unless there's any notification of any harm to you or yourself or anyone else. But that you'll be surprised, people are absolutely willing to tell you absolutely everything about themselves. So just be cautious with that one. Sorry.
That's great. I'm going to let you all go in a second, but Casey's helpfully put the link to the rest of CLH Fest into the chat. Just two events that I want to highlight, although there's more than two going on. We do have our Digital Communities Wales team is doing a session on using social media to engage with communities tomorrow. And also on Thursday, we have a panel event where we're joined by Julie James about the future of community-led housing. And I think a lot of what's been brought up today can help us think about tools that we need to use to continue to build the movement in the future, and maybe taking a few more risks. I as nudge community builders do, which just amazing, and actually doing some of the things we might tell people not to do, but maybe we should be encouraging them to do that a little bit more. So we do have all of those events taking place, but certainly if you have any more questions for Paul or that we can put to Hannah, then please do email us and we'll try and get answers to those. But I can see time marching on and people want to watch football and EastEnders possibly. So please do come along to some of our other events, and we will share the resources with you after today as well. So, and all of these events, as I've said, are being recorded, so we'll be able to share them all with you. If you can't make something, if you want to listen back to some of what's been said tonight, then by all means we'll be able to you'll be able to do that. So yeah, I'll let people get on. It looks like Hugh's cooking dinner, which I think is great, multitasking. So yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight and making a rainy Tuesday evening very pleasant. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your nights. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank
Take
you very
care
much,
all.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.